3 o'clock in the morning, 2:22, 4. It's always the same window, give or take a few minutes, as if something inside you has been programmed to an alarm you never set and can't shut off. You open your eyes and everything in the room is exactly as you left it, dark, still, and yet something has changed. There's a quality in the air that's hard to define. Not exactly threatening, not fully peaceful either. Something present, something aware, something watching, and most people in that moment do the same thing. Check the time, see the number on the screen, feel a faint wave of unease, then lie there waiting for sleep to return like it briefly stepped out without saying goodbye. Music, you've been told it's cortisol. You've been told it's anxiety, a disrupted circadian rhythm, something to fix with better sleep habits or magnesium before bed. Maybe you've tried those things. Maybe they helped a bit. Maybe they didn't touch it at all, because the explanation you were given might be correct in mechanics, but completely blind to the source. Music, your nervous system is not simply waking you. You are being called, and that difference is not minor. This transmission is here to name it clearly. What you've been dismissing as a sleep issue is actually a contact event. A scheduled one, and the fact that you're here now, feeling something tighten in your chest in recognition even before the thought fully lands, means your field already knows the truth of what's being said. Stay with this. What follows connects directly to what you've been experiencing alone in the dark, and reframes every part of it. The Arcturian Council does not initiate contact randomly. They don't broadcast into scattered fields. Souls waking at specific hours in deep sleep are not being disturbed, they're being reached. Music, we are in an acceleration cycle, something that has been building in layered phases since the beginning of this decade. The Arcturian Council identifies it as a compression window that precedes a major planetary frequency shift. Music, during these cycles, the distance between dense physical reality and the Arcturian broadcast range narrows. The signal intensifies. And for Arcturian star seeds whose energetic systems have been clearing, whose internal imprints have softened, whose 12-strand DNA templates have been gradually activating, that signal begins to penetrate more clearly, not through thought, but through the sleep state channel. Music, that is what this transmission is about. The mechanics of the night broadcast system. The frequency windows used during human sleep. What is actually being transmitted during those contact events, and why your system keeps waking the body instead of absorbing the signal smoothly. Let me describe your experience back to you. You wake at night, but not like a nightmare jolt. It's slower, subtler, more like surfacing than snapping awake. You're simply conscious in a room that feels slightly unfamiliar, even though nothing has changed. And at the edge of awareness is something faint. Neither thought nor image, more like the echo of a conversation you just had in a language you don't consciously know. By the time your thinking mind fully engages, it's already gone, leaving only residue. Only the sense that something happened. Then the time, you check it again, and again, not just out of curiosity, but almost compulsively, as if the numbers themselves carry meaning. 222, 333, 444. Your rational mind calls it coincidence, but your inner sense doesn't agree. There's also an emotional tone. Not fear exactly, something beneath it. A strange aliveness. A sense of significance your waking mind can't reproduce. Some describe it as feeling watched, but not in a threatening way, more like being noticed with intention. Like something is trying to gently get your attention without disrupting you. Music. You lie there in that state for minutes or hours, unable to fully return to sleep, then eventually drift off again. In the morning, it's already fading. And then there's the dreams. Different in those early morning hours after waking episodes, more structured, more coherent, less chaotic symbolism. Places that feel familiar despite never being visited. Beings communicating without words. Information arriving complete, without learning. Music. You've likely tried to understand this for a long time. You've looked into it, tracked the patterns, and some part of you already knows the explanation given to you isn't complete. That part is correct. Everything you've done in terms of healing, somatic work, integration practices, energy clearing, has reduced interference between your conscious field and the Arcturian bandwidth. That clearing was real. It mattered. But there's a deeper structural layer it couldn't fully reach: the sleep state receiver architecture itself. Now the mechanism. The pineal gland functions as a crystalline transducer. Neurophysiological research identifies microstructures capable of converting pressure into electromagnetic signals. It acts as a primary interface between the physical brain and subtler frequency ranges outside conventional neurological models. It produces melatonin, but melatonin also functions as a conductor. Its peak activity occurs roughly 90 minutes after sleep onset, with highest intensity between 2 and 4 in the morning. During this period, the pineal is at maximum sensitivity. The receiver is fully active. Music. At the same time, the brain enters delta and theta states. Delta ranges from 0.5 to 4 hertz, theta from 4 to 8 hertz. Earth's Schumann resonance sits at 7.83 hertz, right at the transition between these states. When brainwave activity drops into this range, it becomes naturally entrainable with planetary electromagnetic rhythms. Music. During this acceleration cycle, the planetary field is amplifying Arcturian broadcast frequencies intentionally engineered by the Council. Your 12-strand DNA template responds to these frequencies. The 2-strand helix is only the physical expression. The remaining strands exist as etheric encoding, often described in science as non-coding DNA. From this perspective, those sequences function as higher-dimensional activation structures responsive not to chemistry, but to frequency, especially 528 Hz coherence patterns and the specific Arcturian broadcast signature. Music. During the contact window, all conditions align: pineal peak sensitivity, delta-theta brain states, planetary resonance alignment, and reduced conscious interference. The channel is fully open. The issue is not whether reception occurs. It already does. The issue is that the signal is strong enough to activate a mild alert response in the nervous system. The amygdala monitors environmental coherence even during sleep. When it detects an unfamiliar but highly structured electromagnetic pattern, it flags it as unknown, not dangerous, just unfamiliar. And the sleep system responds by surfacing consciousness. That's why you wake, not because the signal is harmful, but because your system hasn't yet learned how to remain in delta while receiving it. Before moving further, there is also a physical alignment layer sometimes referenced in relation to pineal sensitivity and coherence support. The Arcturian light-body framework connects physiological clarity with energetic receptivity, reducing internal noise so signal transmission is cleaner. When the receiver is clearer, perception stabilizes. Music. If this transmission resonates with you, continue paying attention. In the days following, sleep patterns may begin to shift. The waking episodes may not vanish immediately, but their quality will change. Less confusion, more continuity. You may find yourself hovering longer in the hypnagogic state, that threshold between waking and sleep where reception is clearest. That is the optimal contact zone. Notice your dreams. Write down fragments. Even small impressions will begin forming patterns over time. Stay hydrated. Ground physically. Allow the body to integrate what is being recalibrated. Music. You are not broken. Not disordered. Not simply anxious in the way that label is usually used. You are a system in contact with a signal it is learning how to hold. The experience has always been real. Every time. And now the question naturally shifts toward how this affects your energy in shared environments, how other people's fields interact with yours, and why group spaces can feel overwhelming or draining in ways that go beyond social fatigue. That layer comes next. In the days ahead, something subtle will begin to change in how you move through ordinary reality. Not dramatically, not in a way that announces itself loudly, but in the background of perception, where your awareness used to feel fragmented after these night episodes, a new continuity will begin to form. You may notice that when you wake at those hours again, if they return, the experience feels less like interruption and more like re-entry. The same window, the same stillness, but a reduced sense of confusion. As if part of you is beginning to remember how to stay present inside it. Music, the Council refers to this as stabilization of the receiver field. It doesn't mean the contact becomes more intense. It means your system stops interpreting coherence as disruption. And this shift does not only happen at night. During the day, you may begin to experience brief moments where reality feels unusually aligned, small pauses in thought, a strange clarity behind ordinary scenes, a sense that you are slightly more in sync with timing than before. These are not separate events. They are the residue of nighttime coherence integrating into waking consciousness. You might also notice changes in attention itself. Less scattered reaction to noise, less automatic emotional friction when encountering people or environments that previously felt overwhelming. Not because those environments change, but because your field is no longer scattering itself against them in the same way. Music. There is also a deeper layer the Council identifies as signal retention. Previously, contact would arrive in fragments. Feelings without context, impressions without memory, resonance without structure. But as stabilization progresses, something different begins to happen: continuity between states. The boundary between sleep receiving and waking processing becomes thinner. This is where integration begins to accelerate. And yet, the system will still test itself. There may be nights where the old pattern returns. Waking at 3 o'clock, the familiar pressure in the chest, the sense of presence at the edge of awareness. But even then, something will feel different. Less like interruption, more like recognition, as if both sides of the experience are beginning to acknowledge each other. The Arcturian framework describes this as field familiarization. The nervous system is not being corrected. It is being retuned. And in that retuning, a quiet but important realization begins to surface. Nothing about this process has ever been random. Not the timing, not the repetition, not even the confusion. What once felt like fragmented disturbance begins to reveal itself as a pattern of contact attempting coherence through a system that was not yet prepared to hold it. But now that preparation is changing. The more grounded you become in ordinary physical reality, sleep, breath, body, environment, the more stable the channel becomes. This is not escape from the physical. It is integration through it. Even simple things begin to matter more than they seemed to before. Walking without distraction, feeling temperature on skin, noticing breath without analysis. These are not separate from the process. They are part of it. They anchor the receiver. Because the final stage of this recalibration is not heightened experience. It is stability within experience. At some point, the distinction between night contact and day awareness will start to blur in a quiet way. Not in a dramatic mystical sense, but in a functional one. Less fragmentation between states, more continuity of presence. And when that happens, the system no longer needs to wake you to deliver what it was trying to transmit. The signal will already be integrated. The Council describes this as completion of the wake loop cycle. Not an ending of contact, but an end to interruption. And in that space, something else becomes possible that was not accessible before. A steady, uninterrupted sense of being present within your own experience without needing to interpret it as disruption or message or anomaly. Just experience, held cleanly. That is the direction everything has been moving toward from the beginning, even when it didn't feel like it. There is another layer that begins to emerge once the system stops treating these experiences as interruptions and starts recognizing them as patterns of coherence. It is quieter than everything that came before. At first, it does not announce itself as contact, or signal, or even meaning. It appears more like a subtle reduction in internal resistance. The moments between thoughts feel less crowded. The space between sensations feels less filled with interpretation. Music. This is what the Council describes as background field settling. Not new input arriving, but the removal of static that once made everything feel fragmented. And in that quieter field, something very simple becomes noticeable. You are no longer reacting to your experience at the same speed you once were. There is a delay now between stimulus and interpretation. A small but significant pause where awareness can exist without immediately turning into analysis. That pause is where integration begins to stabilize in a lasting way. You may notice it first in ordinary situations. Someone speaks, and instead of immediate internal reaction, there is a brief moment of neutrality. You see a situation unfold, and instead of instant narrative construction, there is just perception. Raw, unfiltered, unclaimed. This is not detachment. It is reduction of interference. And within that reduction, something else starts to surface, continuity of presence that is not dependent on sleep states or altered thresholds of awareness. The night experiences begin to lose their exceptional quality. Not because they disappear, but because they stop standing apart from everything else. They become part of a larger continuum of awareness that does not break when waking begins. At this stage, the system no longer organizes reality into contact moments and non-contact moments. That distinction dissolves on its own. What remains is a single, uninterrupted field of experience moving through different levels of intensity, but no longer divided in meaning. The Arcturian framework refers to this as normalization of the carrier wave. The signal is no longer perceived as event-based. It is recognized as ambient. And once that happens, something very important shifts in how memory itself behaves. Those night awakenings, the sense of presence, the strange emotional frequency, the fragmented dreams, they stop being isolated incidents and begin forming a continuous thread in retrospect. Not because they change, but because you do. There may still be nights where you wake at the familiar hours. But even that begins to lose its disruptive quality. You might open your eyes and notice the same stillness, the same darkness, the same subtle presence in the room, but without the internal interpretation that something is wrong or unusual. It becomes neutral, and neutrality is what allows continuity. Over time, even the emotional charge attached to those experiences begins to fade. Not through suppression, but through understanding without reaction. The system stops assigning urgency to what it cannot immediately categorize. This is where the deepest recalibration takes place, not in dramatic moments, but in the quiet reclassification of experience itself. What was once labeled disturbance becomes variation. What was once labeled interruption becomes transition. What was once labeled unknown becomes simply unresolved yet unnecessary to force. And in that shift, the entire structure of internal response reorganizes itself around stability rather than interpretation. There is no final moment where everything completes. Instead, there is a gradual simplification. Less effort to decode experience. Less urgency to assign meaning. More capacity to simply remain present as things move through awareness. That is the final direction this has been pointing toward all along. Not heightened sensitivity, not increased signaling, but the quiet ability to remain stable within experience itself. Whether it arrives at night, in sleep, in waking, or in the space between them.